The Bergen County Line. One of my favorites in the entire system. Let's go over its history. The Bergen County Line is a commuter rail line and service owned and operated by New Jersey Transit in the state of New Jersey. The line starts from its southernmost point at Hoboken Terminal and continues north into Suffern, New York, just barely crossing the state line. Between those points lay 17 stations, with terminals included. We will go over the history of each station and their background information. Let's just get in some more background info. From a point in Secaucus just south of the Hackensack River Bridge near the former Harwin Cove Station to a point in East Rutherford north of Rutherford Station, the Bergen County Line uses the former Erie Railroad main line. This portion was opened in 1833 by the Patterson and Hudson River Railroad and leased by the New York and Erie Railroad in 1852. The rest of the line from East Rutherford north to Glen opened in 1881 as the Bergen County Railroad. Until the late 1950s, the main function of the Erie's Bergen County cutoff was as a freight bypass of the at-grade main line through Passaic. Commuter service was relatively minor. In 1963, the Lackawanna-Boonton branch up to Patterson became the new Erie-Lackawanna main line. This was caused by the abandonment of the mainline section through downtown Passaic and construction of Interstate 80 through the old Boonton branch right-of-way into Patterson. The old main line east of Rutherford was now exclusively part of the Bergen County Line. A new right-of-way was opened in 2003 post-construction of the then-new Secaucus Junction station, and this right-of-way runs along I-95, which also runs alongside Norfolk Southern's crossing yard. Alright, enough of that. Let's talk Bergen County Line. This 116-year-old icon of the New Jersey rail network is called Hoboken Terminal. It was built in 1907 and mainly served the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad, or just simply known as the Lackawanna Railroad. And there are four main commuter services: the main line from Hoboken to Buffalo, the Montclair branch from Hoboken to Montclair, the Gladstone branch to Gladstone that still operates today, and the Boonton branch from Hoboken to Dover. The site of the terminal has been used since colonial times to link Manhattan and points west. In 1811, the first steam-powered ferries began, called Hoboken Ferry Boats service under John Stevens, an inventor who founded Hoboken. In 1889, due to several complaints through the New York Times, changes were made to the service such as bigger boats for passengers and more trips. The coming of railroads brought more and more travelers to the west bank of the Hudson River. Cuts and tunnels were constructed through Bergen Hill to rail ferry terminals on the west bank of the river and the upper New York Bay. The first of the Bergen tunnels under Jersey City Heights were opened in 1877 by the Morris and Essex Railroad, which was leased by the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad. The facility that was in the place of the Hoboken Terminal caught fire and burned down in 1905 after the Hopatcong, a ferry docked at the terminal, caught fire at midnight, which spread to the original facility. The Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad decided to build another large terminal since they had more than enough funds to do so. The new facility was planned by William Truesdale, who worked to modernize the DL&W. The rail and ferry terminal buildings were constructed in 1907 by the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad. The following year, the railroad opened a second parallel tunnel. Both tunnels are still used by New Jersey Transit. The tubes of the Hudson and Manhattan Railroad, now known as PATH, were extended to the Hoboken Terminal upon its opening. First revenue train on the new line ran from the terminal on February 26, 1908. Things were looking bright for Hoboken, as in 1935, it was said that the Hoboken Terminal handled more than 17 million railroad passengers and 18 million ferry passengers, possibly the highest number of passengers reported at the time. By 1960, the Erie had merged with the Lackawanna Railroad to form Erie-Lackawanna, and all of Erie's trains were then shifted from the Pavonia Terminal in Jersey City to Hoboken as Erie-Lackawanna trains. At the peak of intercity rail service, 5 passenger terminals were operated by competing railroad companies along the Hudson waterfront. Of the 5, Hoboken Terminal is the only one still in active use. Those at Weehawken, used by the New York Central, Pavonia, which was used by the Erie, and Exchange Place, used by the Pennsylvania Railroad, were demolished in the early 1960s, while the one in Jersey City, which was formerly used by the C&J, was partially restored and can now be seen on static display at Liberty State Park. Today, Hoboken serves 9 New Jersey transit lines: the Bergen County Line, Main Line, Pascagoula Valley Line, Meadowlands Express, Montclair-Boudin Line, the Raritan Valley Line, Port Jervis Line, and the Morrison-Essex Line. Moving northwest, we can find ourselves at our next stop, which is Secaucus Junction. Secaucus Junction was actually a recently built station, being only completed in very late 2003. The station was built to connect New Jersey Transit's 2 commuter divisions, the Newark Division on the upper level and the Hoboken Division downstairs. The Newark Division consists mainly of the Northeast Quarter Line and the North Jersey Coast Line. The Raritan Valley Line is also part of the Newark Division, but it does not stop at Secaucus, terminating at Newark's Penn Station, which is the stop directly after. The Hoboken Division today consists of the Main, Bergen County, Morrison-Essex, Montclair-Boudin, Meadowlands Express, and the Pascagoula Valley Lines. The 321,000 square foot station opened on December 15, 2003. It was known as Secaucus Transfer during planning stages and was dedicated as the Frank R. Lautenberg Rail Station at Secaucus Junction. U.S. Senator Frank Lautenberg, who died in 2013, was a transit advocate who had worked to allocate the federal funds for this project. The 2 divisions had never previously been integrated, even when Conrail ran both networks under the contract to the New Jersey Department of Transportation from 1976 until handing them to New Jersey Transit in 1984. While the opening for the Kearny Connection and the Waterfront Connection in 1996 allowed for the implementation of some interdivisional trains, including the Midtown Direct service to New York Penn Station on the Hoboken Division's Morrison-Essex lines, direct transfers between the divisions were still not possible. Secaucus Junction was built to allow passengers to travel between trains on each division. Before the station was built, passengers on lines to Hoboken Terminal had to use PATH trains or ferries to reach New York City. Conversely, with a few exceptions, commuters whose trains terminated at Newark Penn Station had to transfer to PATH trains at Newark Penn Station to reach Hoboken. As of 2017, ridership is high on both floors, with a total of nearly 27,000 daily riders. Next stop north is Rutherford. There is really not much information on this station anywhere on the internet, but all I could really find is that the Rutherford station was first used by the Patterson and Hudson River Railroad, which was a horse-drawn railroad that didn't even last 20 years. The Erie acquired it in 1862 and rebuilt the station in 1897 into what it is now, still in great condition. It's now served by the Bergen County Line. Ridership is high at the station, as it sees around 1,400 daily commuters as of 2019. The next stop is Wesmont, which is a station located in Woodridge, directly next to the Pascagoula Valley Line. This station actually did not exist before 2016, which makes it New Jersey Transit's newest station. Wesmont opened on May 15, 2016, as part of the $400 million Wesmont Station development project surrounding a former Curtiss-Wright aircraft engine factory. The station is the newest in New Jersey Transit Rail Operations network. The station and tracks are located along Woodridge's boundary with neighboring Wallington, although the platform can only be reached from the Woodridge side. NJT announced plans for the station on June 11, 2008, with the overall redevelopment of the 70-acre site expected to include over 700 housing units, 130,000 square feet of retail and office space, a middle school, and a community center. Construction was scheduled to begin in 2009, with the station originally due to open in 2011. However, PCB, which is a chemical known to exist in rivers, contamination of the land required extensive environmental cleanup after previous work for asbestos removal. The first residential apartments opened on Valentine's Day of 2012, and the train station had its official groundbreaking on March 11, 2014. The station quietly opened on May 15, 2016, without a formal ceremony. Today in 2023, it sees about 200 commuters daily. The next station is Garfield, the town of which used to have 3 train stations and only 2 are left active. The original depot for Garfield was built in 1881 and served until 1973 when it burned down. There used to be a 3rd station in Garfield that was formerly used by the Erie called Spring Tank Station, but I could literally not find any information about that station at all. Until somewhat recently, however, Both stations in Garfield were relatively bare bones in structure. However, in 2011, Plauderville, the other station in Garfield, received a major upgrade by means of new high-level handicap-accessible platforms. Coupled with its much greater amount of parking in comparison to the Garfield station, it receives higher ridership. Speaking of ridership, the original Garfield station gets a very mediocre ridership of only 175 commuters daily as of 2018. Moving on to Garfield's sister station, Plauderville. Plauderville's original station was built in 1913 and served until 2011 when it got a major upgrade. 2 high-level platforms and a very clean waiting room with 2 grade crossings on each side for easy access for commuters. Prior to the completion of the new Plauderville station, Garfield was not fully served by NJ Transit. Although Plauderville was utilized by a fair number of commuters in the area, judging by the station featuring parking for over 250 cars, it and its Passaic Street counterpart saw service only during peak travel times. Trains departing for Hoboken Terminal would begin passing both stations in the early afternoon, despite outbound service being available all day. After the new station at Plauderville was completed, NJ Transit added more Hoboken-bound service in the evening and at night. The station sees about 600 daily commuters as of 2018. Might I add, rail fending the rush hour at this station is fun as hell. Our next stop is Broadway. Broadway is one of 2 stations that serve the Fair Lawn Township of New Jersey. Originally known as a stop called Warren Point, the elevated Broadway station dates back to 1934 when Route 4 was being built between Patterson and the George Washington Bridge. The original station, however, dates back to 1881 when it was first constructed. There really isn't much else to the station in terms of history. In 2015, the station underwent an upgrade where most of its signage and shelter was replaced. In addition, signs were installed at the corner of Broadway and East 55th Street, and the wall abutting the stairway to the Suffern-bound platform identifying the station as Broadway Fair Lawn. As of 2018, the station sees 318 daily riders. The next stop is Radburn, Broadway's sister station, also located in the Fair Lawn Township. The station was designed and built in 1929 by Clarence Stein as part of the Radburn development. It has been listed in the state and federal registers of historic places since 1984 and is part of the operating passenger railroad stations and thematic resources. And of course, there was an original depot that first opened in 1881 like most of the stations on this line. The location of the Radburn development was considered beneficial because of its location on the Erie Railroad with connections to Jersey City, Newark, and Manhattan. The designers of the development saw the benefit of a suburban railroad station for planning throughout the New York metropolitan area. In July of 1928, they proposed the Fairlawn Station Square with a depot that costed $60,000, equal to about $1 million today, and it would serve those who would be in the neighborhood after construction of the first 200 homes. The new depot would serve Suffern to the north and Hoboken to the southeast, along with connections to the area. A new railway depot was constructed on the Bergen County Railroad in 1929. The depot replaced a wooden freight depot that served the area. This new station was designed by Clarence Stein in the Dutch colonial revival to keep the idea of modern and efficient and in a similar style to the Radburn neighborhood. The station today sees a very large amount of riders for a suburban station, with around 1,600 daily riders as of 2019. Now entering the second half of the line, we enter our next stop, which is Glen Rock Borough Hall. Glen Rock actually has 2 stations, one served by the main line and the other served by the Bergen County Line, both of which are literally 3 blocks apart from each other. I could not find any information on the station whatsoever, other than it was first opened in 1881 as Paramus, and it got renamed to its current name of Glen Rock Borough Hall in 1891. Ridgewood is our next stop. Ridgewood is the 10th station going north on the line. Ridgewood is actually older than most of the stations south of it going to Hoboken. This station, along with several of the line's preceding stations, was built as early as 1848. Service to the area known as Godwinville began on October 19, 1848, with the opening of the Patterson and Ramapo Railroad, a railroad connecting the Patterson and Hudson River Railroad at Patterson to the New York, Lake and Erie Western Railroad at Suffern. A new station was built in 1856 then in 1859. However, in 1915, the Erie Railroad, now in control, started construction on a new pair of ornate train station depots at Ridgewood, both of which opened on November 28, 1916. The Erie Railroad bought Ridgewood Station in 1916 as a grade-separated elevated station. Until the 1960s, this station served passengers heading to Binghamton and other cities en route to Chicago or Buffalo. The Erie Limited and the Lake cities served passengers headed toward Chicago. The station received eastbound passengers from the Atlantic Express. In the final years of long-distance service, after the Erie's merger with the Lackawanna Railroad, unnamed trains ran to Binghamton, where passengers could switch to the Phoebe Snow after a layover. The discontinuing of the Phoebe Snow in 1966 and then the Atlantic Express in 1965 marked the end of long-distance passenger service through Ridgewood. Ridgewood Station underwent a major renovation project between 2009 and 2011 to make the new station compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. As part of the project, high-level platforms were installed and the side platform on Track 1 was demolished to allow for installation of an island platform that would serve Tracks 1 and 3 and replace Track 3's side platform, which was fenced off. Ramps were installed on both platforms and elevators were installed to carry passengers from the platforms to the floor of the underpass on Franklin Avenue. Ridgewood now serves as a regular commuter station and an occasional terminal for select weekday trains that terminate there. It also now serves the Bergen County and Maine lines, and it sees a whopping 1,700 riders daily as of 2021. Next stop is Ho-Ho-Kus. All I could find about this station is that the station's current westbound structure was constructed in 1908 with river stones and a tile roof. This replaced facilities built in 1886 that burned. The first station, built in 1860, had also burned down several years after construction. The eastbound side was an irregularly shaped waiting shed built in 1909. The depot was originally built in October of 1848. Today, as of 2019, the station sees about 500 daily riders with trains that serve both the Main Line and Bergen County Line. Moving on to the historic Waldwick station, this station is seen to rail fans as one of North Jersey's most iconic train stations. It was originally built in 1848 and still proudly serves the present-day Main and Bergen County lines, along with the limited Port Jervis line service. This station did not open along with the rest of the Paterson and Ramapo Railroad on October 19, 1948. The Erie Railroad, who took over that railroad, established a stop at Waldwick around 1986-ish. A wooden station depot was built on the east side of the tracks at that point. The historic original station house has been listed in the state and federal registers of historic places since 1978 and is part of the Operating Passenger Railroad Stations and Thematic Resources. The Waldwick Community Alliance has leased the building until 2034. After years of being in disrepair, it has been restored and now houses the Waldwick Museum of Local History. The station sees about 500 daily commuters as of 2020. Our next stop is Allendale, probably the least talked about historic station on this rail line. Train service in Allendale dates back to the 1840s when the New Jersey State Legislature approved the creation of the Paterson and Ramapo Railroad. This new railroad would go from the city of Paterson in Passaic County to the New York State line in Franklin Township. In 1884, Joseph Warner Allen, the surveyor of the railroad, submitted a new route through the valley in the area of Ho-Ho-Kus. A year later, the railroad approved Allen's plans for the new railroad. Construction began on the railroad in 1847, and the next year, service along the line began in October. Regular full-time service began the next month. The first station master at Allendale was Smith Roswell, a former resident of LaGrange, New York. He was an agent there for over 5 decades, later opening the first grocery store in Allendale area and serving as a postmaster. Roswell operated a general store in 1859 near the depot and opened a second one around 1878. Allendale and nearby Ramsey were surrounded by strawberry farms. Rail service allowed the farmers to bring their crops to the market personally, shipping millions of baskets to markets in Newark, Paterson, and New York City. Later in the 19th century, the Allendale station began handling commuter rail to New York City. The land was considered quaint and serene. City residents began moving to northern Bergen County for the fresh air and a cheaper cost of living. Allendale quickly became a summer residence for many prominent entrepreneurs, and officials of the Erie Railroad. Robert H. Birtle, the railroad's president from 1864 to 67, lived in Allendale in the summer. Several of his relatives were also vacationed there in the summer, as well as William Pitt Sherman, the Commissioner of Accounts of New York City and Erie Treasurer. Former Jersey City Mayor Charles O'Neill also called Allendale his summer home. As a result of having so many railroad executives and politicians as nearby residents, Allendale Station became an express stop, further encouraging people to move there. Businesses in Allendale continued to open around the train station during the late 19th century. James Lincoln, the Marshal of Allendale, erected a building near the railroad depot on the east side of the tracks. This new building attracted businesses, including a local pharmacist who had left nearby Ramsey for Ohio. Lincoln himself opened a confectionery and a stationery store in his own building. A bakery was opened by William Cornhoff in 1903 until it burned 6 years later and relocated further up on Allendale Avenue. The station also became a hub for the first livery stables in Allendale, run by local entrepreneur Alonzo Barrett. A barbershop also opened in 1917 in the area of the newly relocated depot. The Wall Street crash of 1929 and the Great Depression adversely affected Allendale. Residents were unable to pay for their homes and some stood abandoned along Allendale Avenue. In 1931, the Erie Railroad moved its headquarters from Jersey City to Cleveland, Ohio. Many of its workers moved with it. The village, however, worked through its garden club to keep the plants and atmosphere around the depot in good shape. The depot saw some upgrades in 1932 as well. Repairing and adding onto some of the depot, more work was done in 1939. In 1938, during the elimination of some of the grade crossings in Allendale, the telephone poles around the station and tracks were removed. At the beginning of the next year, a joint project of the Erie, the Works Progress Administration, and the New Jersey Public Utilities Commissioners built a new overpass to replace the grade crossings and a pedestrian underpass at Allendale Station to replace the closed grade crossings at West Allendale and Park Avenues. In 1949, the borough purchased the land around the depot from the railroad. The purchase closed a year later and parking lots were built. The Allendale Garden Club re-landscaped the grounds in conjunction with the borough. In 1960, the Erie Railroad merged with the Lackawanna Railroad to create the Erie-Lackawanna Railroad. The merged company was unable to compete, and like many of the northeastern railroads, was combined into the federally owned Conrail in the mid to late 1970s. In 1982, the station came under the control of New Jersey Transit, the public agency which had taken over commuter rail in the state from Conrail. That year, the depot was renovated heavily along with the other stations in the state. The goal was to encourage the borough to take over operating and maintaining the station building. After 5 years of renovation, New Jersey Transit finished it off by installing new low-level platforms at the depot, replacing the sidewalks and curbs and reseeding the lawns. Today, Allendale is served by the Main and Bergen County Lines with limited Port Jervis Line service. The station as of 2018 sees 425 passengers on a daily basis. The next stop north is Ramsey. Unofficially known as Ramsey Main Street, it's one of the two main stations in the Ramsey Township. Railway service to the Ramsey station of Ho-Ho-Kus Township began on October 19, 1848. The Patterson and Ramapo Railroad began service between Jersey City and Suffern, where a connection was made to the Erie Railroad main line. The station was built on land donated by Peter J. Ramsey, who was a local landowner at the time. The Erie Railroad, who took over service, built a new depot at Ramsey in 1868, making it currently the oldest active passenger depot for commuter service in the state of New Jersey. Service at the longer-coming depot in Berlin, New Jersey, which is older than 1868, ended service in the 1960s. Ridership at Ramsey as of 2023 is around 580 passengers daily, given the station is served by both the Main and Bergen County lines, with, of course, limited Port Jervis line service. Ramsey Route 17 is Ramsey's much younger and much newer sister station, with the current facility being only completed in late 2004. Before the current station form, the station was called Westervelt's. This is because the old depot that was first opened in 1848 was called the Westervelt Ackerson House. It saw immediate service by the Patterson and Ramapo Railroad, given the depot was opened the same time as the railroad. The current station we have now was opened on August 22nd of 2004 and currently sees around 850 passengers daily as of 2021, and is obviously served by both the main Bergen County lines and limited port trip. Yeah, you get the idea. Moving a little more north as we get closer and closer to the New Jersey and New York state line, we find ourselves in the small town of Mahwah. Mahwah is our next stop on the line, and it is currently the main and Bergen's least used train station. The Patterson and Ramapo Railroad was extended through Mahwah in 1848, and while Mahwah was designated as a station, it was only a flag stop, which meant that passengers desiring a ride would need to notify the station agent, who would then flag down a passing train to stop. Even after the Erie Railroad leased the Patterson and Ramapo in 1852, there was no initial service change to Mahwah. And it wasn't until the citizens of Mahwah persuaded the railroad that there was enough passenger and freight traffic for a depot that one was constructed in 1871. The land for the new depot was donated by Albert Winter, a local citizen. The new station depot made it easier for those who had to travel to Suffern, Oakland, or Ramsey to ship their products along the Erie Railroad. In 1872, the land on a hillside nearby was bought by Ezra Miller, a local inventor who created Owino, or Awino. I don't know how to say it. But anyway, she created Owino, a farm estate which is now part of the Cragmere Park. In 1904, the Erie Railroad redeveloped the area around the depot. The crossing east of Ramapo Avenue next to the depot was changed from at grade to a new railroad bridge to the south, and the original 2-track alignment was widened to 4 tracks. Freight trains would use the inside tracks. A new depot was also constructed in 1904, with the original 1871 depot being moved to the fresh land called Depot Park, saving it from demolition. In designing Depot Square Park, it involved the extension of East Ramapo Avenue to Franklin Turnpike and a new connection with Miller Road. The square within the 4 roads became the park. In 1908, electrical crossing gates were installed in Mahwah as Rockland Electric came in and powered up the municipality. The new electrical gates would be managed by a man who was working at the gatehouse that used to serve as the watchman's shanty. The 1904 depot only lasted over a decade, as in 1914 the station burned due to a fire that was left untouched. A new depot was constructed by the Erie Railroad the very next year with an irregular shape design with a wood and stucco design. The roof was created out of asbestos shingles. In 1967, the Mahwah Historical Society acquired the 1871 depot and began to restore the structure. In order to do this, the station was moved 200 feet from its site to a spot across from Winter's Pond. The depot required repairing of the roof, installing new glass, repairing doors and chimney. Special molding was inserted around the depot, and the flooring required replacement. The depot was completed on September 22nd of 1968. In 1970, the Society acquired a caboose once used by the Erie that was constructed in 1910. The Erie donated ties and rails in return for the payment of the track crews, and the caboose was moved by a crane into its new spot. The 1915 station underwent renovations in 2016 and is still proudly serving Mahwah Station. Mahwah today, as I said, is the least used main and Bergen County Line station, and it receives a very low ridership of only 160 daily passengers as of 2019. Let's move on to our last and final stop. Here we are at long last. Our final station is called Suffern, located in Suffern, New York, just barely crossing over the New York state line. Suffern is currently the terminal station for all Main and Bergen County trains. Railway service in Suffern began with the construction of the New York and Erie Railroad in 1841 on land owned by the family of the local settler John Suffern in Antrim, Ireland. As part of the generosity, the station at New Antrim was named Suffern in their honor. Regular passenger service in the area began on September 23, 1841 between Goshen and Piermont. Railroad service through Suffern changed on October 19, 1848 when the Patterson and Ramapo Railroad opened for passenger service, resulting in the standing Suffern station becoming a part of the railroad instead of the main line. A new station was built in 1862 to help serve the two lines better. This was replaced on March 9, 1887 between the junction of the Erie Railroad main line and the Piermont branch. The railroad replaced this station on New Year's Day of 1941 with the current structure. The construction of a new railroad through the town of Ramapo and the village of Suffern date back to the incorporation of the New York and Lake Erie Railroad, a proposed line from Piermont in Rockland County to Dunkirk in Chautauqua County in November of 1831. After several years of delays in funding, including gaining the interest of financial influence of Elizur Lord in 1832, survey work for the new line began in 1834, with the report in January 1835 finalizing the line. Despite New York City being the better terminal for a railroad, Lord demanded that the railroad end in Piermont, 24 miles to the northwest. The New York and Harlem Railroad also offered to build a branch line to meet a rail ferry from Piermont to connect the two railroads for a direct New York City connection at the cost of $90,000 in 1834, which is equal to around $3.3 million today, and Lord declined. Construction of the railroad began with the groundbreaking ceremony on November 7, 1835, at Deposit in Delaware County. Lord was not present at the ceremony due to disagreements with John Gore King, the president, about a route through Orange County via Newburgh instead of Piermont. However, a panic came on December 16, 1835 when the Great Fire of New York broke out, resulting in the elimination of funding for the railroad. Many people who paid subscriptions for the new railroad lost their wealth and numerous banks collapsed. As a result, the people in charge offered two engineers, Andrew Talcott and Edwin Johnson, to resurvey the railroad because of their confidence the New York State legislature would help back the railroad. This optimism was short-lived as the finances were continuing to struggle and politicians in Albany were growing opposed to the railroad. The counties along the proposed railroad, save for Rockland and Orange, sent letters to the politicians to support the railroad. Governor of New York, William Marcy, also attempted to help the cause by saying that any decision should be done with the matter of the public good and encouraged his colleagues to reconsider the views. As a result, both houses of the legislature and the governor signed a bill to help fund the railroad. The funding for the railroad, which was $600,000 in 1836, would only come if the railroad spent more than twice as much in return. We're talking $1.3 million in 1836. Imagine how much that is today. Anyways, already reeling financially, King tried to help raise new funds for the railroad and could not get outside financing from banks in the UK, which was, overseas. As a result, Lord returned to the project in 1836. Lord proposed that the state match the railroad with a loan of $100,000. As a result, the requirement would be that the railroad be built 10 miles in each direction from Dunkirk and Piermont. The officials, who preferred Lord's investment over King, removed King from his post and made Lord president. Back in control, Lord immediately let contracts for the construction of the two 10-mile railroad segments. He also asked that the railroad start letting out contracts to extend the railroad to Goshen and Orange County and soon after Middletown, 45 miles from Piermont. Construction of the railroad resumed in 1838, reinvigorating interest in a forlorn project. By fall of that year, the construction of a railroad dock in Piermont began and a track to Sparkill had been installed. By the summer of next year in 1839, the contracts for construction to Goshen and Middletown were approved. As Lord and subscribers continued to help fund the railroad, more positivity resulted in further construction. By the end of 1840, the entire line had been funded to save the section from Deposit to Binghamton, where serious challenges awaited. However, New York City was upset that the railroad was being built for its benefit, continued to have no influence in the direct benefits. Locals made the things tough for Lord, accusing him and his colleagues of defrauding investors and having corrupt agreements with Rockland and Orange County investors. Lord, knowing the issues with such accusations, sent an official protest to Albany in December of 1840, resulting in an investigation where the New York State Assembly's Committee on Railroads noted that no corruption or illegal acts had occurred. Lord, feeling he had succeeded in his mission, resigned as president on May 28, 1841. Before his resignation became official, Lord asked the Board of Trustees to reimburse the original stockholders for their massive financial losses in the 1835 fire. With construction mostly complete to Goshen, a celebratory first ride was held on June 30th of 1841. James Bowen, who replaced Lord as president, Henry Pearson, the vice president, other executives of the Board of Trustees members, came from the Reed Street Pier on the Hudson River on a ferry built to Piermont, where the train ride would begin. The original locomotive for the railroad, Rockland, took them in some reports through the area at 10 miles per hour. Despite the grand ceremony and gala, the railroad had announced that regular passenger service and freight service would begin later that year. The village of New Antrim, New York, 32 miles from New York City, received the station on the new railroad, and as part of it, the municipality and station gained the name of Suffern, named after the first settler of the area, John Suffern of Antrim, Ireland. The new name was made as a gift to the family, as Elizabeth Suffern had been a financier of the railroad, and Judge Edward Suffern, her son, helped provide the right-of-way for the railroad on family property. The railroad built the station in Suffern on Orange Avenue near Wayne Avenue. This station was a single-side platform at the base of a nearby Nordkop Mountain with a wooden depot. The New York and Erie Railroad slowly opened extensions as time passed. Service came to Middletown on July 1st of 1843, to Otisville on November 1st, 1846, to Port Jervis on December 1st of 1847, Binghamton at the end of 1848, and Dunkirk on May 14th, 1851. Most of this section is now used by the Port Jervis Line, owned and operated by Metro-North. Like the video for a history on that. Today, Suffern is used as the main terminal for all Bergen County and Main Line trains. Trackage, however, doesn't end there, as the Port Jervis trains continue along the Port Jervis branch, which stretches for another 54 miles northwest. Ridership at Suffern is around 900 daily passengers as of 2022. At long last, the video is finally over. I'm shocked if any of you actually watched it to the whole way, because it was literally just me talking for 36 minutes. This project took me 3 months to complete, having started it on December 28th of 2023, and being done with it is so relieving. So, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it interesting in any way, make sure to subscribe. I got a ton more history videos coming up soon. For now, thanks for watching.